I had always thought of myself as an ordinary child living in an ordinary family. I wasn't spoiled, but I wasn't treated unfairly either. At least not before everything changed, before my sister was born. That night, I was jolted awake by frantic knocking on my door and Aunt Clara's panicked voice. I still remember her pale face as she said, "Ivy, you need to pack your things. Your mom is in the hospital." In my mind, hospitals meant accidents, pain, and all the terrible things children never want to think about. But the real horror wasn't the accident or even loss. It was what happened afterward. Rachel, my sister, was born nearly 2 months premature. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I understood it was serious because suddenly everyone in the house focused entirely on that baby. The weeks that followed were a blur of long days spent at Aunt Clara's house, overhearing hushed conversations about Rachel's condition. I wasn't allowed to visit the hospital often, only a few brief meetings with my mother, and each time she would only say one thing: "Be good, Ivy. Mommy is very busy." And so I learned how to become invisible. When Rachel was finally brought home, things became more suffocating than ever. The house we once lived in turned into a sterile fortress where every trace of me slowly faded away. Hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, and antibacterial sprays appeared everywhere, to the point that I could smell rubbing alcohol even in my sleep. My mother became obsessed with keeping Rachel safe. She scrubbed every surface at least 3 times a day, monitored the nursery temperature by the hour, and washed her hands so often that her skin cracked. But what hurt me the most wasn't the strict rules or the excessive cleanliness. It was the fact that I no longer belonged in my own family. The slightest sign of illness, a sneeze, a minor cough, would immediately send me to Grandma's house. Or worse, I'd be kicked out of the room with my mother's wary eyes watching me like I was a walking threat. At first, I thought it was a blessing. Grandma Amelia was kind and always let me help her bake. There, I didn't have to whisper every word or tiptoe around like an intruder. But eventually, I realized something painful. I wasn't sent away because my mother cared about me. I was sent away because I was a risk. I tried everything to win back my parents' attention, but to them only Rachel mattered. The first time I earned straight A's, my mother barely glanced at my test before returning to her list of Rachel's medications. When I won first place in the school science fair with a renewable energy project, my father sighed and told me to store my display board in the garage. Rachel might be allergic to the dust from the cardboard. I never knew if that was true or just another excuse for them to dismiss me. But the hardest blow came when I was 12. 4 months, I had practiced tirelessly for the school talent show where I would perform a piano piece I had spent a whole year learning. I had dreamed of seeing my parents' proud faces in the audience, of hearing their applause when I finished. But on the day of my performance, Rachel developed a mild fever, 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit, just a common fever that any child would experience. And just like that, my parents stayed home with Rachel while I stood on stage in a crowded yet utterly empty auditorium. No one was there for me. 2 weeks later, Rachel had a 15-minute flute recital, playing a simple piece that any child could learn in a few days. The entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended. They clapped, cheered, and spoke of Rachel's natural talent, as if she were a musical prodigy. That was the moment I understood. Nothing I did would ever make them see me. Nothing would ever change the fact that in this family I was nothing compared to Rachel. Rachel quickly learned how to use that to her advantage. From a young age, she knew how to manipulate every situation to get what she wanted. A little fatigue meant skipping school. A slight headache let her lounge on the couch all day, and if she complained about difficult homework, our mother would call the teacher to ask for an extension. Meanwhile, I had to handle everything on my own. Rachel only needed to whine and someone would fix things for her. I didn't hate Rachel. I just hated how my entire world was erased to make space for her. And so I accepted that no one would ever care about me, that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. But I also learned something: if no one would cheer for me, I would applaud myself. If no one would help me succeed, I would carve my own path. I didn't know then that one day quietly walking away from this family would be the best thing I ever did. 10 years passed quietly. I graduated high school with honors, but my parents skipped the ceremony because Rachel had a dance recital. I put myself through college working 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. No one noticed. When I landed my first job in tech, my mother's only response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Rachel made the cheerleading squad?" But something happened during those years of invisibility. I thrived. While my family was busy coddling Rachel, I was building my future. I learned to code, developed apps, and started my own software company. Every rejection at home fueled my determination to succeed. My breakthrough came when I developed a security application that caught the attention of major tech companies. What started as a side project in my tiny apartment became a bidding war between industry giants. The final selling price? $12 million. I kept the news to myself, knowing how my family would react. I maintained my modest lifestyle, lived in the same apartment, and drove the same used car. The money went into investments, and I continued working on new projects. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially in small towns. This Thanksgiving was different. I arrived at my parents' house early to help with preparations as usual. Rachel, now 25 and still living at home, was sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone while Mom fussed over her exhaustion. Ivy, Mom barely looked up, set the table, and used the good china. The Hendersons are coming. The Hendersons, our wealthy neighbors who my parents desperately tried to impress. Their son Mark had recently taken over his father's business, and my parents were not so subtly pushing Rachel toward him. As I arranged the plates, I overheard Mrs. Henderson in the kitchen. Did you hear about that brilliant young woman who sold her security software? She's from right here in town. Made millions, I heard. I froze. My mother laughed dismissively. Oh, those tech stories are always exaggerated. No, Mrs. Henderson insisted. It was in the business journal. Let me find it. She pulled out her phone and my stomach dropped as she scrolled through articles. Here it is. Ivy Mitchell. Wait, Ivy? You're Ivy. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to find my mother staring at me, her face a mix of shock and something else, calculation. Rachel sat up so quickly she knocked over her essential glass of warm lemon water. What? That's impossible. But Mrs. Henderson was already showing them the article, complete with my professional headshot and details of the sale. $12 million, she read, plus ongoing consulting fees and stock options. What happened next was like watching a theater production unfold. My mother's shock transformed into a syrupy sweet smile I'd never seen directed at me before. My father suddenly appeared interested in my life for the first time in decades. And Rachel's face contorted with an emotion I recognized all too well: entitlement. Ivy. My mother rushed to hug me, her arms unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Before I could respond, Rachel's voice cut through the room. This isn't fair. I'm the one who needs money. I've been trying to start my influencer career, but I need better equipment, a new wardrobe. Now, sweetie, Mom turned to Rachel, then back to me with that calculating smile. I'm sure your sister would love to help her family. After all, family comes first, right? I stood there, the good china still in my hands, as years of neglect and dismissal crashed through my mind. The same people who couldn't attend my graduation were now looking at me like I was their salvation. Of course, my father chimed in, we should discuss how to manage this blessing as a family. Rachel has so many dreams and your mother and I aren't getting any younger. The good china made a sharp clinking sound as I set down the last plate. 10 years of buried emotions rose to the surface as I watched my family's transparent transformation. Manage this blessing as a family? I repeated slowly. That's interesting, considering I haven't been treated as part of this family for 20 years. Don't be dramatic, Ivy, my mother waved dismissively. We've always loved you equally. Equally? I laughed, the sound strange even to my own ears. Let me remind you of what equally looked like. I turned to face them all, including the now uncomfortable Hendersons. When I was 13, I had appendicitis. I called Aunt Clara to take me to the hospital because you were all at Rachel's dance competition. You didn't visit me once during my 3-day stay because, and I quote, Rachel needs routine. That was different, my father started, but I cut him off. When I got my college acceptance letters, you told me you couldn't afford to help with tuition because you were saving for Rachel's future. I worked 3 jobs, lived on ramen noodles, and nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Meanwhile, Rachel got a new car for her sweet 16. Rachel stood up, her face red. It's not my fault they loved me more. The room fell silent. Finally, the truth was out. You're right, Rachel. It's not your fault. It's theirs. I gestured to our parents. They created this dynamic. But what happens now? That's entirely my choice. My mother stepped forward, her smile strained. Darling, we're family. Surely you want to help your sister achieve her dreams. Dreams. I pulled out my phone and opened Rachel's Instagram. You mean like these posts mocking her loser sister, who works some boring tech job? Or maybe the ones where she jokes about how I'll probably die alone with my computers. Mrs. Henderson gasped softly. My mother's smile faltered. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady. I'm going to walk out that door and you're all going to continue living exactly as you have been. Without my money. You can't do this to me. Rachel shrieked. I deserve that money. I'm the special one. Special. I turned to her. Let me tell you what special looks like. Special is building a company from nothing. Special is working until your fingers bleed and your eyes burn. Special is succeeding despite having no support, no encouragement, and no family to lean on. I picked up my purse and coat. By the way, I bought Aunt Claire a house last month. You know, the only person who ever showed up for my events, who called to check on me, who actually cared. My father's face darkened. Now listen here, young lady. No, you listen. For 20 years I was invisible in this family. I was the backup child, the one you tolerated but never loved. Today you finally saw me, not because you're proud of what I've achieved, but because you want what I've earned. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Rachel, you wanted to be an influencer? Here's some influence for you. Success isn't handed to you because you're special. It's earned through hard work, something you've never had to do. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Rachel posted a tearful video about toxic family members that went viral in our small town. My parents tried damage control, telling everyone I was confused and acting out. But Mrs. Henderson's social circle knew the truth, and suddenly the family's perfect image cracked. I moved to Seattle the following month, where my company's main office was located. Aunt Clara came to visit often, proud of the woman I'd become. She told me that Rachel had finally gotten a job, her first real one at age 25, after my parents couldn't afford to support her influencer career anymore. Sometimes I think about that Thanksgiving, about the look on their faces when they realized what they'd lost. Not the money, they lost the chance to know their daughter, to be part of her success story. They lost the opportunity to love someone who, despite everything, would have loved them back if they'd only tried. Last week, I received an invitation to Rachel's wedding. Attached was a not-so-subtle registry listing filled with expensive items. I sent a card with a simple message. Congratulations. My gift to you is the same thing you gave me, the motivation to succeed on my own. I heard she cried when she read it. But for once, those weren't tears that anyone rushed to wipe away. The money that my family wanted so desperately? It grew to $50 million through smart investments. I used it to start a scholarship fund for students who, like me, had to make it on their own. Because sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you build yourself, one achievement at a time. And that's worth more than all the millions in the world.